Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Cowling with Film Independent, and welcome to the Coffee Talk for December, last one of the year. Before we start, a little word about Film Independent. We are the non-profit arts organization based in Los Angeles. We are probably best known for producing the Film Independent Spirit Awards every year on a tent on the beach in Santa Monica. But we're also known for a lot of other events. We do a lot of year-round screenings, conversations, Q&As, seminars, panels, workshops, etc. You can find out more about us at filmindependent.org. Membership is open to everyone, and only members get to vote in the Spirit Awards. So you should, if you're not a member, join so you can vote on the Spirit Awards for 2021. So very excited for today's coffee talk. This is a coffee talk that spans 3 time zones. I'm currently in London, and we have a guest in the States and a guest somewhere else in Europe. So very excited. First up, she is the director of the Danish hit Brothers, the Oscar-winning In a Better World. That's Denmark's Oscar winner for Best Foreign Language Film. She also won the Emmy for Best Directing for her acclaimed adaptation of John le Carré's The Night Manager. And last year, she directed Sandra Bullock in Bird Box. But most recently, she directed all 6 episodes of The Undoing, which has had us all glued to our TVs. Joining us all the way from Copenhagen, it's a pleasure to welcome Susanne Bier. Susanne, are you here? Turn on your camera,
Hi.
step on stage. Hello.
Hey.
Welcome.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. How are you?
Very well, thank you too. You're in Copenhagen, right? Just an hour away from me, or an hour's difference.
Yeah.
So if you're having coffee, I hope it doesn't keep you up. But thank you so much for staying up late for this. And joining Susanne today, all the way from Los Angeles. He's the creator of the Amazon Prime hit series Hunters. That's the show about Nazi hunters in the 1970s, starring Al Pacino and Logan Lerman. He's also written for the reboot of the iconic TV show, The Twilight Zone. Please welcome David Weil. Hey, David.
Hi, guys. So nice to be with you. So good to see Susanne. This is the best.
How are you doing? So the way these coffee talks work is I'm going to step off stage for about half an hour and let the two of you chat amongst yourselves and talk shop, and everyone listening can ask questions. We have a quick Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can submit questions. I will come back in half an hour to take as many of those questions as possible. If you don't have a question to start to kick it off, maybe I will kick it off with a question for both of you. And I'm curious how you met and how you know each other. So maybe that's a good way to let people know how this coffee talk came together. So I will say see you later and be back in about half an hour. But thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
You start, David.
Okay, I'll start. You know, way back when, I think 6 or 7 years ago, I wrote a pilot called Consent that Michael Sugar and Ashley Zalta and the late Steve Golan were producing. And we, took this big risk and leap of, sending it to this director who we just admired. And we thought immediately she would say no. And we'd have to move on to our second or third or fourth choice. But we got so lucky that Susanne wanted to engage in this brilliant, adventure with us. And so that's how we met. We met on this project called Consent, and we've been friends for 7 years now, work together. We're working together. So for me, it's the greatest gift. And I just want to ask you questions because I feel like everyone just wants to pick your brain and hear all about you. So I will be doing that as much as possible. But thank you for having me join you, Susanne.
So I'm gonna have my version of a story. So I got this amazing weird script. It was like incredibly. It was really powerful. It was really powerful. It was a little bit all over the place, but it was super, super, super powerful and kind of and it had a very distinct voice and a very distinct sort of insight to human beings. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'd like to speak to the writer. And this boy came, like this kid came, and he was so clever and so fun. And it was like, whoa. And we just became friends after that, because I think it was like, I think we were both a bit, well, this is really interesting. And then I involved David in like, you were kind of ghostwriting a lot of stuff that I did. Amongst other things, you were ghostwriting Bird Box, because it was written, and it was written really well. But I was still feeling as a director that there were a lot of scenes that weren't quite the way I wanted them. So I had David secretly come and write it all over, and I think I had you come on set and write, and it was kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I think it really did stem from our friendship, and just we share our that same dark sense of humor, and we just we always look for solutions and how to make things more real. I've learned all of that from you, and I think what's been so wonderful is being friends first, and then really understanding your vision and getting inside your head and your mind and what you want to achieve, and how can I help with the text, help get to, because we just speak that language. I think we honed that language over so many years of friendship, that it was just such a blast to help realize your vision, and to be doing that on all these different projects.
And do you think Consent is ever going to be made?
I hope so. But it's a great story, right? Because I think it was a little ahead of its time, and it just goes to show you. And I think for everyone watching, where it was this scary, risky prospect, I think, because of the subject matter and the content. And networks are really afraid, I think, to tackle this, and to tackle it in the nuanced way that you wanted to tackle it. And then I feel like a few years later, we saw many, series and films that tackled that subject in such a bold way.
You have to tell what the subject is, because otherwise.
Sure, yeah. It was loosely based on the events in Steubenville, Ohio, and Maryville, Missouri, and it was about the rape of a young girl, a teenage girl in a small town, and about a hacker who came into this town and sort of unearthed all these secrets and crimes of the small town. But it really was, I guess, a story about three women, three generations of women. The mother of this victim, this younger female sheriff or cop who's investigating, and then the victim herself. So yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it probably was before its time. And I don't know whether now the moment is possibly gone a little bit for it, maybe. I don't know, that whole thing. What do you think about that thing of timing in terms of project? That sort of like knife edge of things having to be right at the right spot at the right time.
I think it's so important. And I think, there's such amazing pieces that have come out since. Unbelievable, for one, or I May Destroy You, which is brilliant. And so I think then, to try and, I think they just spoke to those issues and those ideas with such integrity and such, authority. And I think it hit at a moment where I think culture was ready to really hear those stories and see them on screen. Of course, these are, since the dawn of time, things that crimes that have been committed and that people have been dealing with. But to your point, I think timing is sometimes everything. And I think, the pieces that we like to do, I think we always like to do something that's challenging and something that's bold and different. And sometimes I think it takes an audience or a culture to catch up, to want to and be able to digest and hear those stories in a dramatic format.
But you know what, that thing of timing, because I think in a way, I think in life, you might bump into the right person at the wrong time and it's never going to work. I think that timing thing is just like the most important thing. And it's important in terms of subject matter with what we do and how we tell the stories. And then obviously within the stories, within the way we tell it, yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel like, The Undoing is a prime example, I think, of something that speaks to the urgency of now and this notion of class in America and in the world, really, and marriage. And we've been so, for the past, many months, unfortunately, we've been in this pandemic. And I think, you hear about these stories of these marriages, right? It's these two people who are forced to spend probably even more time than they're used to together. And so what are all the intricacies and dynamics of that? And I think, Susanne, hearing just how many people are watching and responding and on the edge of their seats still, for those who haven't, finished, and certainly the ones who are, watching in real time. I mean, this became, as everything you do, a phenomenon. I mean, it became a worldwide phenomenon, like Bird Box, like The Night Manager. And so a question to you is, you're the constant throughout all those projects, tens of millions of people tuning in and watching. What if you had to identify it or distill it? And I know that's really challenging, but what do you think it is about your approach to storytelling that is so exciting, I think, to people all around the globe?
I do think that I don't think there's one answer, first of all.
For sure.
Because I do think, that is that weird serendipity thing, which it's not like a consistent pattern, and it's also not a trustworthy pattern. It's not like it's always going to be like that, because that serendipity, like that sort of what's the word?
Amalgamation.
Yeah. Of a lot of different elements coming together is probably the only real answer. But I do think being sensitive to time, being sensitive to the world around you, being sensitive, a little bit that whole thing of, being sensitive to what people are talking about in the street, being sensitive to what's going on in the news. And I don't necessarily mean the captions of the news. I mean even these people who are sitting watching something, how do they react? Having a real interest and real sort of curiosity about that, I think is definitely an important thing. And then I think I have a lot of love for the characters, and I have a lot of love for the stories, and I have a lot of passion for the things I'm doing. And I think that sort of somehow is visible.
I think that's one of the many things I've learned from you is just watching you work and being on set with you is, I may come up with a line, right? Hey, you're not feeling a certain scene or a moment in a scene. And so we're kind of brainstorming a line, and I would pitch something and you would say, no, she would never say that because 10 years before this, she was doing X, Y, and Z. I feel like you've always created these histories for all of your characters, and you just call bullshit, I think, on things that feel like movies, things that feel like a TV show. You're always, I think, after the reality. And it's pushed me, I think, as a writer, toward really searching for what may not be the quoted kind of line, but like, what is the reality of the moment? What would a person actually say in these scenarios? Because I think one of the amazing things, that I see in patterns of your work is you take these people who we can all relate to, and they're put in these very extraordinary situations and circumstances. And I feel like you're always trying to find the reality. How would they react, and how would we react in such a situation?
How do you like, if you talk about your own piece, if you talk about Hunters, how do you apply that to something which is so extreme?
It's so hard. And I think for me, it's a constant conversation with myself and with the other writers and with Jordan and with the actors. But I think it's always about finding an emotional truth, even if, it's a scene that's so heightened and Jonah's going out and trying to kill a Nazi and Al Pacino's playing Meyer, and it's like such a grand scene and it's so fantastic. But I think it's about finding those moments of truth and emotional truth and reality that can balance some of the more heightened elements. I think that Hunters to me is always this really difficult balancing act. And I'm so proud of it. And I think
it's great.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Thank you. But we take risks, and it doesn't always work. That balance doesn't always work.
No, but it does work like so much of the time. And it does have, because I was really impressed by the fact that you actually managed to do those. Because it's also funny. It's also, and one of the things that kind of can be difficult with, like balancing truthfulness and comedy is because comedy always want to take you somewhere slightly heightened, slightly kind of, but it does that. It does kind of balance those two things, and it is very, very touching while still being funny.
Thank you. It to me, that's the Jewish experience, right? There's so much humor, and then there's so much horror, and it's like both those things can be true, and both those modes can be true. And so even if there's a bit of a wink at times or a bit of a heightened element, it's always grounded in a reality that I knew growing up, in some way.
But how can you not? How do you then deal when you not then tell, and you have these wonderful actors playing Nazis?
Right.
I mean, do you still fall in love with them a little bit?
I still find, I try, because they are human, it's like trying to find that humanity. And I think that, going into this, when I was in college, and one of my thesis for this class on genocide was about the cognitive dissonance of perpetration. And it was looking at journal entries and diary entries of Nazis after the war, and their kind of reckoning and recollection of their crimes, and their reckoning of how could I have brought myself to do these horrible things. And so that became a bit of the kind of historical research that I did, in just trying to understand. To me, they're always villains, through and through and through. There's very little gray to me, but at the same time, I think a piece that is a clarion call, or tries to be, to continue to tell the story about the Holocaust so that it will never happen again. I think it's important, obviously, to identify that these were human beings who carried them out, and why and how. And so, that was part of that exploration of those characters. But I will tell you, Al Pacino, who watched all the cuts and was just so involved, and he's the greatest collaborator in the world. There were moments in the cuts that he saw before, while we were still doing ADR, where the Nazis felt a little heightened or a little, mustache twirly, and he was very sensitive to that and pointing those moments out. So we really were able to pare back a lot of that, and in large part because of him and his notes, which were just fantastic.
So because he didn't want it to be too funny, or he didn't want he didn't want them to kind of be too likable by being funny.
Yeah, or feel like they're in a different movie, feel like they're in a different piece. I think he was always trying to find that reality to it. But how, speaking of Al, and speaking of, Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock and Donald Sutherland and Hugh Laurie and Hugh Grant, what is your approach? You work with, these A-list actors are drawn to you and they want to do everything with you. And how do you approach each of their different processes? Like, how do you kind of tailor make, or is it the same for all of them, and you bring them into your process? How does that work, working with all those actors?
Well, I try to kind of figure out what they need, or what their sort of how they work, and then I pretty much do my thing. Like, I do things like I rehearse every morning with the actors, and whoever they are, I'll rehearse before the crew come with the actors, and we play, and there needs to be certain playfulness about it, and there needs to be, hey, let's remove all the dialogue, let's move the scene from the kitchen into the bathroom, or do kind of things, and some of it then stays like that, because then when the crew comes onto set, I'll show them what we rehearsed, and some of the crazy things stays, and a lot of them goes away after having played around with it. So I guess I'm quite sensitive to their emotional, you want to say, state of mind, or their potential turbulence, because I do feel like all great artists, a lot of actors are emotionally turbulent. And so I kind of try to be sensitive about that. And I do see my role a little bit as hopefully someone whom they can trust, and someone who can kind of calm them.
Yes.
And then I just go about my day, like, I just kind of do what, shoot the scenes, and I don't. It's not like a super cozy, small talky set. It's not like that.
Right.
But there is like a good, fun, polite atmosphere. But it's not like, hey, let's hang out and talk about other stuff. It's not like that. It's focused.
And it's so interesting you talk about rehearsal, because I remember, on Bird Box, so much took place in the house, and you were having to cover, I think, 9 different characters in these massive scenes. And how much, in your filmmaking, I know how much rehearsal goes into, everything you do, which is so brilliant. How much is designed, and how much do you capture and find things in the moment for a piece like Bird Box, where there's so much to be doing at one time?
I mean, before I come to set, so this is before I meet to rehearse with the actors, I have like very strict rituals. Like, I sit down with my coffee for an hour and a half before I leave the house. Awesome. And I kind of look at the day's scenes. Yep. And I don't kind of block them.
Yeah.
But I do sort of think about them, and I kind of try and anticipate what the actors might want to ask, or where the discussion might want to go. And so that I'm just prepared. And because being prepared in that way is also a huge sense of liberty, in a way, because, once you kind of massaged it all, you can kind of treat it quite freely, because you kind of know what the essence is.
Yes.
And so I guess being very prepared enables me to pick up on all the spontaneous gifts that happens on set.
That's awesome. I love that. I love it. I do, and I see it in action, and it's amazing.
Hey, tell me about your directing experience.
Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. We just finished shooting. I just finished shooting a show for Amazon that I won't say too much about, but it's a small little sci-fi piece that is really special. And there 7 episodes, and I directed 3 of them. And it was such an amazing experience, because I always have, and I think always will, consider myself certainly a writer first. But I took so many lessons just watching you and your process and how you work, and tried to translate it as best as I could into this show. But it was really amazing, and it was very special. And I think it was special to write something on the page, and then really be able to bring it to life, and kind of see it all the way through, from the moment I started on final draft, kind of writing the piece, to now, we're in post and in the edit on it. It's been a really amazing process. And I think it's made me a much better writer, seeing it from a director's point of view and a director's lens, how I can write a script that I think can support a director's vision, and how I can write a script that can support what an actor needs and wants. And so it was really wonderful. I want to do it again for sure. And then there are things that, there's scripts that are so special to me, that I think need such a specific director, AKA you, that I'm just like, please go make this.
But how did you feel about the sort of rigorous having to be on set at 4:30 a.m.? I mean, how because as a writer, the one thing which is great is that you do have your personal space and a sense of personal freedom, right?
Definitely. And I think that, as a showrunner for Hunters, I was there till 6 a.m, and I barely slept. So that was great, rehearsal, I think, for directing, just having to be there the whole time while we're shooting and be rewriting on set. And so I was really there so much. The difference with directing is that I never got a chance to sit. I never sat down. So the old adage of just bring 2 pairs of shoes to set, I think is so right, because my legs were exhausted after. But it was very special. And I will tell you, I've been a writer for for my whole life, but working, I guess, now for 10 years. And it was scary to say, I want to direct. It was scary to say, I'm a director. I think until I just did it, it wasn't going to be, So I think for anyone watching who is a writer first and they're interested in filmmaking and directing, just declare it. I feel like they should just say, today's the day and that's who I am. And the moment you say it, then people look at you that way. But Amazon was incredibly supportive of that and really encouraged, me to do it. So it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience.
I can't wait to watch it.
Oh.
And were you scared? Were you kind of
terrified, especially with the actors, because I just wanted to make sure that, as you say, watching you with Sandy, it was so amazing. And just how protected I think she felt, and how you always had an answer for her because you thought everything through, right? Even if she raised the question and made you think in a different way, or you had already thought about the way you were going to do it. So you had context and answers as to how, you would approach it. So I needed to have an answer for every word of the script, why it was a taco instead of a burrito, why it was day instead of night, just really what the intent was for everything. But each of the actors I worked with were so talented and so different, and their processes were so different. So it was a great learning experience. And I think over the course of even those 3 episodes, I became a different director in each one, which was nice, which is really nice. And so speaking of, what are we doing next? What do you want to do together? What I'm sure everyone is sending you everything and is so just eager for you to attach. But is there a kind of environment or a world or a story that you're really
are we not having a job conversation?
I think so. I'm trying. I have scripts right here I need to send to you. But what do you is there, I feel like you flex so many different muscles with each piece that you do. Is that purposeful? Is it, hey, I want to do something?
Yeah, I want to escape my own boredom. So I want to kind of want to escape what I know already. So I kind of, I do feel that the most important thing is to maintain a real deep curiosity. And it wasn't arbitrary that I asked whether you were nervous, because I also think you need to maintain a certain nervousness about your subject matter, about your material. Like I know that if I'm not a little bit scared of it, it's not going to be great.
That's incredible, and I completely agree. And if it's not impossible to make, it's not worth it. To a certain degree, right? It's like
yeah.
You want to tackle the hardest things to make, the things that studio execs are a bit afraid of, perhaps. It's exciting.
I mean, you have to be prepared to fail, which is a very terrifying thing. But I think if you aren't, then it just stops and it becomes meaningless. But also, if you fail, because being prepared for it, it's like betting. I mean, there is a real chance you might fail. You got to be able to forgive yourself. I think the thing I've learned personally most of from my life, the first film I did was a huge success, and my second film was a monumental disaster.
Huh.
And I was completely paralyzed because I thought, oh, it's going to be this easy, great.
Right.
And then I realized, oh fuck, it's not that easy. And then, almost more importantly, I kind of got over it. And I kept working. And I think the fact that you get over it and kind of, it's just very strengthening for your ability to continue working.
It must be liberating. I mean, it really must be liberating just to feel like you're going to make the films that you love, and people are going to love them or not. But if you love them, and if you care, it's that's awesome. That's really, really awesome. And so too, like, just even the things that we've worked on, for every hit and for every piece that's out, I'm sure we both have dozens and dozens of projects that never even saw the light of day. I have scripts probably stacked this high that everyone has passed on around town. So it's really just that feeling of how rare it is, I think, when something hits and connects.
Yeah. You look at them and go, whoa, in 10 years time, I'm going to sell them and begin.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's funny. That's what happened, you know, with the piece I'm working on right now. It was a failed film that I turned into television, and failed only because it was just such a long development process, 6 years of almost getting made and almost here and almost there. And then really wanting to see if it had a life in TV, and it does, luckily. So we'll see how that works out.
You know, long developments is another interesting thing, which I think, which I think is a real dangerous. I think it's a real dangerous thing, because I think I always feel when things have been in development for a long time and then they're done, there's so much undercurrent of build-up ambition that it almost becomes grander than the project itself.
Well, that was one of the amazing things I learned from you on Bird Box, which was I think we wrote so much together on set because you knew in your gut exactly what you needed and wanted. And it was amazing. Like, there were, you know, some other great writers who had written on the piece. But I think that you knew exactly what you wanted. And sometimes it was just that kind of energy that we needed, right? It was the, oh shit, we got to shoot this, you know, in 30 minutes or 2 days or whatever it is, that we just kind of got distilled exactly what you were after. So I'm with you. I think sometimes you just need a deadline, or you need that momentum to really, you know, trust that instinct and gut.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So what is your name?
Oh man, what do you do? We got to talk after this. I'm just waiting.
This.
I'll do. You could choose a book behind you, and I'll just do it. You just tell me at random. It doesn't matter what it is. Bosh. I'm in. We'll do something great.
You know what it is, right?
Yeah. I don't know how we'll create a story for that, but it'll be really good.
It will definitely be how can you say, it will definitely need a lot of VFX.
It will need a lot of VFX. A great art director.
Yeah.
What are you so busy developing and just reading and just here's a really interesting question. Do you follow fans on Twitter? Do you like to listen to their theories about who did it and all of that?
I do a little bit, like when before episode 6, I do a little bit, but I'm the same way as I feel it's important to kind of stand up if you fail at something. The same way I'm a little bit wary of getting too engaged with success, because I do feel that it kind of impacts you in an unhealthy way. Like I kind of just want to be myself and do what I do and be with the people I'm close to. And of course I'm enjoying it. I'm very grateful for it, but I don't want to, I get a little bit shy about the whole thing. Like I don't want to kind of.
That's the best. The best for me is on Twitter when people ask a question or you know, have a theory, and it's like I'll go with it. I didn't intend for that to be that, but they should join the writers' room. That was like a great idea, you know. I'll just say, yeah, those are intent the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey. I'm back. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No,
that was fascinating. But do you want to take some questions from the audience?
Sure.
I'll start with the first one that came in from Jonathan. Pretty easy one for both of you. Who are your greatest influences in filmmaking?
You start, David.
David, yeah. Susanne, and it's not just because we're on this Zoom, but it's because I mean, for all the reasons I said, I really just learned how to be a more humanistic writer and a writer that could work with a filmmaker and a brilliant filmmaker like Susanne. So everything I do, I think, will Susanne want to direct it? What would she do in this moment? How would she realize it? And so that's been just such a joy for that, and to be her, her friend. And I think, like, growing up, the movies I love, Kubrick is a huge influence. someone I love, the Coen brothers, of course. And I love Jacques Audiard. I really love his films. I love A Prophet. He's great. Sisters Brothers was quite interesting, but those are some of my faves.
Susanne?
Michael Cimino. I mean, Deer Hunter is my kind of all-time favorite. I love a lot of the 70s, like when American filmmaking went from being a fantasy went into being real, like movie like Dog Day Afternoon. I love those films, and they have had a huge impact on me. Then I have a really soft point for comedies, like Some Like It Hot, like those kind of movies. Yeah.
I was shopping in a supermarket years ago in LA, and I turned a corner and walked past an aisle and looked down and saw someone as I walked past, like, that's Michael Cimino. So I went back and I talked to him, and we talked like next to the crackers or the cereal for about half an hour. He was delightful. I think he was pleased that he was recognized, and by someone that loved his work.
And was he, at that point, had he become a woman?
I don't know. I mean, this was late. He died a few months later, so this was he became
a woman at the end, right?
I don't know. I think he went through a transition. Yeah, I don't remember reading that he had a different name, or that he was always, and when he died, I think
maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that yeah.
Oh, he did look very different from his photographs on set of The Deer Hunter and Heaven's Gate. But that's what I talked to him about. I said I saw Heaven's Gate, the full version, on the big screen. It's the only time I'd seen it, and just loved it. And he was, very gracious to hear that.
Such a great,
all sorts of things. A very bizarre place to run into Michael Cimino.
Really underestimated piece. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a question here from Ted for you, Susanne. Says, I believe you studied with, I may be mispronouncing this, Mogens Rukhoff in Denmark.
That's right. Yes.
Could you talk about some of the things you learned from him that have stayed with you and been particularly valuable, and maybe explain to our listeners who he is as well?
Well, I have to be really honest and very disappointing here, because Mogens Rukhoff is this brilliant screenwriter, and he was a brilliant teacher. He also smoked in class, and I hate cigarette smoke. So whenever we would come into class and we would sit down and we would start talking, and then he would light a cigarette and I would leave, and and I would only come back into the class when the window had been opened and there was no cigarette smoke, just being insanely boring. But so I can't really say too much about his genius as a teacher, but I mean, he's been hugely influential on a lot of students. I know Thomas Vinterberg did Festen with him, and I think Thomas Vinterberg considered him the most important influence cinematically. So I'm the wrong one to ask, but I do recognize his importance.
Okay. A question for both of you from Jonathan, just saying, how did you get your start in the industry, and what advice do you have for filmmakers just beginning their career? And I will add to that for you, Susanne. Marcia says she's a female director, has directed 3 films and is a huge fan of Danish filmmakers. Was it easier to break through as a female director there, because Marcia finds it very hard in Hollywood?
Look, there's no doubt that a system like the Danish system, which essentially is an art foundation system, lends itself to much more experimental, much more innovative cinema. Because, you can there's even like a particular system for like young filmmakers where the movies are very inexpensive and therefore, can be risky in terms of storytelling and in terms of potential commercial value. So yes, I do think it's easier breaking through. I also think Denmark is a more egalitarian society. I think as a woman, it's easier to get to do things, and it's easier to get to kind of break that wall of initial trust if you are a woman that it is in Hollywood. I do think that television for Marsha, if I were to give you an advice, I would strongly get involved with television, because right now there's such a need for television. And actually, I find that television is way more courageous and way more experimental prone than feature films. I don't know whether David wanna.
No, I so agree. And I think, when I look at the shows I'm running and just the filmmakers that we have, ensuring that there is inclusivity and diversity in every sense of the word, both in the writer's room for our cast and especially for our filmmakers, it's tantamount. And so I think there's just so much more opportunity, especially in TV, a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, Hunters has a very diverse group of directors, right? Veterans, newcomers, male, female.
Yes. Yeah. And it's really just because, the show is about America. The show is about, and America is incredibly diverse. And so it's really ensuring that there's authenticity in the stories that we're telling. And that we're seeing the show from all the perspectives of the characters who are in it. And so too that, that diversity and inclusivity is reflected in the writer's room as well. It's just, it makes beyond being the right thing to do, it makes the best art. It makes the best show when you can involve people from all, different places and walks of life.
I actually had a question for you about the directors of the show, and I think it's probably a good time to ask it now. And that is, firstly, how do you choose your directors, and how do you choose which episodes they direct?
It's a great question. The directors, every show is different, right? So every series that I work on, it's a different question of if we were to distill the show down to its bare essence, what is it really about? And then what is the visual language that we're after? And how can we find artists who can match that vision? I will tell you, I wish it were as designed as, for this episode, we need this kind of filmmaker. The truth is, it's often who's available in this block and who's available for that block, and who's going to shoot another show, and who falls in and who falls out. So there are just so many, practically there's so many elements. And sometimes there are these wonderful happy accidents that kind of take hold. I'll tell you, we had this amazing director on Hunters. Her name was Millicent Shelton. And there was this episode that was a very Jewish episode. It was, there was a wedding and there was a hora. It was all about Jewish culture. And Millicent is Black and she's not Jewish. And it was such a thrill to be able to share so much about Jewish culture with her in our, talks leading up. And she was discovering new things. And she brought so much of her own, story and her own point of view to this episode, and infused it, as Jewish as the show, that episode was, infused it with her vision. And it just elevated the piece tremendously. So that was a very, very wonderful situation.
Can I ask a question as well?
Yeah.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Can you, is there like a huge difference from episode per episode when they're directed by different directors? Sometimes
it is. And I think sometimes in the edit, there's more that needs to be done to ensure that the visual language of the pilot, let's say, is reflected throughout. But I think that, moving forward in the series that I do, I think having fewer directors could be more helpful, so that you don't feel as many departures from the vision as possible. And that may not be, it still may be many directors, obviously, I hope, to come into the series and bring their vision and life to it. But I find moving forward, I would rather work with, let's say, 3 directors on a 10 episode series than, let's say, 7 or 8. And to you, Susanne, for Night Manager and The Undoing, what is your process and your calculation? You stayed on for all of them, and in many ways, I think you really show-ran those shows, in tandem with the 2 Davids. So what do you like to do? What's your approach?
Well, I treat it like a very long film. I don't really treat it like I don't really treat it like episodes. I kind of treat it like a 6-hour long film, and I then just kind of deal with it like I would a very long movie. And then obviously, like with The Undoing, I'm very very kind of excited and kind of, you know, fascinated by how do you do with the cliffhangers, like how do you build them and all of that. But those are, like, you know, want to say chapters in a movie, or act in a movie almost. And so that's how I do it.
That's awesome.
Are is that show scheduled by episode, or is it scheduled as a block, Susanne?
It's scheduled, it's totally cross-scheduled. It would be like one scene from episode 6 in the morning, and then episode 2 in the afternoon. And it's completely like, I mean, ideally you like to schedule according to main locations, because that's sort of the most pragmatically the best way of doing it. And we did that to the extent we could. I don't like that. I'm one of the directors who doesn't enjoy continuity. I quite like that things are shot out of order. I feel that the certain randomness adds something unexpected to it, which I enjoy.
I love that. I love that so much. Truly, that's awesome.
Yeah.
There's a question here from Lisa, who is also my sister, about The Undoing. She's downstairs, actually. She wanted you to talk, Susanne, about the color palette, especially of Grace and Jonathan's apartment. She found the colors kind of oppressive. Was like, can you talk a little bit about that decision? Was that deliberate?
Well, they're not meant to be oppressive in Jonathan and Grace's apartment. They're meant to be kind of, I want to say, kind of more cozy. There is, I mean, it's meant to be a real home. Like, it has a kitchen which I used. It's sort of as opposed to like Franklin's, which is very beautiful and very serene and in the cooler shades. Well, I mean, it has all those kind of reddish colors, which I like. It's there's warmth to it. I mean, I'm sorry if your sister think it's cold, but
it's also the very tall ceilings. You know, it's very much a New York space, not a London space. You know,
no, it's like a brownstone, and it's obviously, you know, however much they pretend they don't have money, of course they have a lot of money, and you can tell that there is a slight sort of, there's an attempt to a certain lifestyle pushed in to an environment which is slightly different.
Okay. A question from Jocelyn was talking about both your relationships with your DPs, shot choices, like, for example, on The Undoing, David, on your new show. I don't know how much you want to kind of give away there, where it's, you know, hasn't been released yet, but talk a little bit about DPs.
You want to start?
I'll be quick. I you know, on the new show, we had an amazing DP, Will Rexer, who shot Hunters as well, who is just so incredible. So we had such a close relationship on this new show. He did all 7 episodes, and it was an amazing collaboration. We, you know, really explored films that we love and styles that we love. There's a great resource called Shop Deck. If people don't know about it, they should. Where you can, you know, pull your, you know, frames from all these different beautiful films. But it was really about finding a common language, and then in each of these episodes, finding something that felt different and unique to the piece. But Will Rexer is amazing, an amazing, amazing mentor and just collaborator. And
then Susanne, The Undoing was shot by the great Anthony Dodd Mantle, right? Who has a lot of experience on the 95 films. He shot The Celebration, right?
Yeah. And he's a brilliant DP, and he managed. I mean, it was such a balance trying to figure out how do you kind of address that sort of lavish world and still have a kind of something which is like your own. Like, how do you not how do you not indulge it visually, but yet embrace it without indulging it, which was sort of the big challenge. But what I also do, I always have like a very strong second unit. So I had a guy who has done that for a number of my film, a young DP who went around New York and did all those shots from New York, which sort of, I always felt that with that show that New York was going to be a character on its own.
And sort of establishing shots and the interstitials and
right. So he spent like a few weeks just shooting New York at different times of the year, at different times of the day. And I think it has a huge impact on the show.
Right.
And also, and also it's like, you know, it's like a lot of shots being delivered into editorial that we could kind of play around with.
Right. We have time for probably one or two more questions if people still want to submit questions through the Q&A. I have one for you, David. Advice for, or what directors listening in should know about directing for TV if they've never done it and they want to. What advice would you, or what should they know about the medium that is different? Because a lot of people do know that, you know, TV is very much a writer's medium. Although we're now seeing directors direct entire seasons, but
right.
For directors who've only directed indie features, what should they know about directing for TV if they're looking to move into that field?
Yeah, I mean, I think at first it's going to feel a bit more like a machine at times. You know, I think it's going to be so much if they're coming into a show and it's the 4th episode of the 3rd season that they're directing. I think it's so important to be watching the entire show and see what the show really does and what the visual language is, but also to come with some ideas of how they can kind of make their mark on it, maybe even in some small ways or big ways. But as a showrunner, as a writer, my favorite thing is collaborating with the director. So I think that it's going to be so much for them about coming in and just being so excited and eager to be talking to the writer, be having that collaboration, ask questions, give your thoughts and opinions. But it is such a collaborative medium that they should just be prepared for that.
Anything you want to add to that, Susanne, having come from films and moving into shooting TV, or like 6-hour films?
I want to say not to be thrown by it, not to be kind of keep a bit of reserve within themselves, like engage and be there, and but also kind of leave a bit of space so they don't forget themselves. Is that too is that too weird? Like
Yeah. No, I get that. So last question from the audience, and then I have one more for both of you, but this is for both of you. You both have an amazing balance between entertainment and message. How do you negotiate that line? David?
For me, everything I write, everything I work on comes from a place of wanting to tell a story for a certain reason. I think the pitfall becomes when you make the thing about the message and you don't tell a very human story first and foremost. I think let your impulse to do the thing, you know, or to create the piece be about whatever you want to talk about or grapple with or question, right? Like for me, Hunters is not a statement by any means. It is a question. I'm questioning things and I want the audience to question them too. But I think you also have to recognize this isn't a documentary. It doesn't need to be didactic. It should have thrill. It should be all the things that people want to escape and come to watch, you know, cinema for.
Susanne?
I want to say that I kind of play this game with myself where I'm just about entertaining. This is just about entertaining audiences. And then I kind of know that there is an undercurrent, and I know that there's something else I want to essentially deal with or talk about, but I try not to make it the forefront of my actual work, because I do feel in a way that the director's biggest, what you really need to do is you really need to tell your story. You really need to make sure that every moment has intensity, that every moment is sort of vibrant, is funny or sad or scary or weird or whatever it needs to be. And defining that one thing to an extent is more important than in a way than being too obsessed with the overall message. And so I do think that if you're at the bottom of your story and at the bottom of who you are and how you think as a human being has a certain kind of things that you are preoccupied, like notions, ideas, then it will come through, but the other thing should be at the top.
It's like things that interest you personally will just come out in your work. So your fingerprints on the work will organically create that message, right?
Yeah, I think that's, but I do think sort of focusing on actual storytelling is much more rewarding. And I actually do think that that's the way the other more substantial message come through.
Yeah. So my last question for everyone that does these is, we just would love to hear your pandemic picks. People, probably burnt through every show that's out there now and movies, but if you have any favorites, classics, hidden gems, movie, TV, maybe a Danish classic. I don't know how far you want to go back. Denmark has a great history of cinema, but any picks from both of you? Susanne, do you want to go first?
Well, I want to say, it was not arbitrary when you earlier said Some Like It Hot. I went back and watched Some Like It Hot, The Apartment. I went back and watched a number of those comedy, which was just like, other than laughing and enjoying it, or you're also I'm in awe of the brilliant dialogue and in awe of the brilliant writing and that kind of exquisitely accurate way of storytelling. So I would probably, my advice would be to at least watch The Apartment and Some Like It Hot again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, David?
I've been doing such a documentary kick. The Last Dance was so fantastic. It was a thing I look forward to every week. There's a new doc called Murder on Middle Beach on HBO. That's in 4 parts. It's so beautiful and harrowing and haunting. There's a new one on Heaven's Gate. There's just a lot. I love these kind of true stories, and I think being in this moment right now has given me time to explore some of the things that have been a little unturned or untouched. So that's been a small little bright light among all this darkness.
That's new. Can I chime in here? I want to say that normally that's the thing I do as well. I watch documentaries. I kind of watch way more documentaries.
Yeah.
And any that spring to mind?
Which one was the last one I watched? I watched the last year of that I watched that yesterday, the Obama's last year in the White House, which was really interesting.
That's incredible. Was that the photographer? Was it through Pete? Was it Pete?
It's on Netflix. It's called the last year, I think it's called.
Yeah. Awesome.
Watch it. Yeah.
That's so cool.
It just kind of gives you suddenly have this insight into things that you didn't really know about.
Yeah. Totally. Did you watch The Crown yet this season?
Fun.
You watched The Crown season 4?
We're not completely done. We are kind of halfway through. I'm loving it.
It's so good. It's so good.
They're great.
Awesome. It's incredible. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and Olivia and Tobias Menzies, they are just so good.
So, and a lot of your night manager cast, Olivia and now Elizabeth, right? I feel like they're all making a
Tobias, but they are just great as king and queen.
Yeah. No, so good.
Well, no, he's not king, but I mean, he's Prince Philip and queen.
Yeah.
So, it's awesome.
Well, yeah, a lot of picks there. We are out of time, but This has been a coffee talk with Film Independent, the last one of the year, but check us out. Check out the past ones on our YouTube channel. Just leaves me to thank our guests today, David Weil. Thank you, David, in Los Angeles.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you. Thanks, Susanne, for having me.
Well,
yeah,
thank you.
come back soon. And yeah, and Susanne Bier. Thank you, Susanne. This has been tremendous. Thank you for staying up late.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Hopefully you'll both come back soon and maybe join us in person in LA when you're back in LA and everything is back to normal, whenever that will be. But for now, stay safe and be well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.